Welcome back to Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. I'm your host, Brad Wilder. Last time on the show, Cathy Peters was here. There's a lot to discuss when it comes to sex trafficking and kids, children, minors here in Canada. Our last episode, when you go back and take a quick look, you're going to find that we covered it all. How they're doing it, how they're bringing children into this evil, and how these kids are really coming from disrupted families along the way, which is something else that is obviously most concerning as well. John Euler is standing by. Dr. Gillies is here, and Cathy Peters once again. So let's just jump right back into the conversation and let them continue from part one.
Brad, thank you. And this is unfortunately so engaging because we have to be engaged. And Anne, I know you in Canada, me in the States, we as therapists, trauma therapists, this is hard for us to hear. This is reality, and other people need to hear it because it's very easy to turn a blind eye or to just ignore this altogether. And it is a reality that a lot of people are choosing not to look at, including people of faith.
You're absolutely right, John, and welcome back, Cathy. One of the things I think we need to really recognize is that anyone can be targeted. We did talk about the children who are particularly vulnerable, and that's very true. They are an easier target, but we also know that there's targets at school, and most of the children still have some vulnerabilities. But backstage before we came back on, Cathy, we were talking a little bit about the church. And as a fellow believer, you have had some experience with the church. Actually, you've had some similar experiences to what I've had, in the sense of thinking that we can just present what we know, and we have all this research and we have everything, and the church will listen. And I felt like I was beating my head against the wall for many, many years, until just this last year in the lane that I'm in. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, and then we'll just pop in with some other questions here and there. How's that?
That's great. In terms of the church, I mean, the question is, how can I even do this? And I'm sitting here talking about something so awful with a big smile on my face. It's because literally, this is not an issue I looked for. It kind of came to me. I mean, it really came to me. And I told you the story about the young woman that I promised I would stop it in my province. And so I just keep going. I would really say without my faith, I couldn't do this. It's too dark. It's too depressing. And I've had so many, whether it's law enforcement or educators, say to me, how can you keep doing this day in and day out? And I mean, I do a lot of presentations each day. As a matter of fact, I think I've counted 400 presentations just in the last 2 years. I can do up to 5 presentations a day. So what keeps me going? It really is a God thing. I mean, He's placed this issue on my heart. You just don't harm children. You don't harm the youth, the children, and the vulnerable. So, I mean, that I get. And so I'm pretty passionate. And again, I can go to sleep at night knowing I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm staying in my lane. I'm being faithful, and God will open the doors. So actually, I'm an optimist. I believe we can actually turn the dial back on this. But you mentioned schools, Anne. There is more and more research coming out, and there's a couple of organizations up here in Canada that are doing really great work. But Public Safety Canada is doing great work on sex trafficking. We now have a national hotline number to call. You have a number down in the States. You have for years. We now have a number. But here's the organization I love, and any of your listeners can access this. It's cybertip.ca. And if you know a child that's being cyber bullied or sextortion, anything online, go to this organization. They're a charity. They're out of Manitoba, right in the heart of Canada. They're one of the best in the world, one of the best globally. But they have the research. So I like to look at their research, and they've come out with research recently saying that school personnel are involved with sexually assaulting children at school. So just don't assume your children are safe at school. There are predators there, there as well. There's an organization called Parents Against Child Abuse down in the States. We call it PAXA, PAXA. And they have found the same research as well. Again, we love our teachers, but you need to know who's teaching your children. What are the policies at school? Is there a policy as the type of books in the libraries? What is the position on access to pornography if at school? You know, there's got to be something in place. So PAXA talks about it. Cybertip.ca talks about it. The point is, our children now, we live in a digital world. We as parents, as adults, need to protect our children. How do we do that? Education is our greatest weapon. Just learning about this, and then what are the resources available so we can all get help. But schools, churches, this can all happen anywhere. That's the point. And the parents that scare me the most are the ones that say, Cathy, this would never happen to my son or daughter. It would never happen. It wouldn't happen in my family. Those are the families it will happen with. You've got to realize it can happen to your children. Why? Because we're in a digital world now. If your children have access to the internet, guess what? The sex traffickers are after them. The porn industry is after them. It's not that your children are looking for this stuff. We have a whole system now of tech companies, of sex industry, the pornography industry that are really wanting access to our children. I mean, we're talking the family, and it seems that everything is kind of, I call it the war against the family. There's even a book on it, The War Against the Family. So the more knowledge we have, the more we can do our best to protect our loved ones.
Cathy, I'm so grateful and glad you brought up not just schools, but also the church. The churches need to awaken. My greatest concern next to the trans movement are churches. As I was working with sexual predators in prison, the one thing that caught my attention that I did not know is that the most sophisticated of pedophiles will specifically target churches. Mm-hmm. That to me was eye-opening, and that's why I started my training site, churchprotect.org. That is one of the most fertile of hunting grounds, and how many survivors, how many in alternative lifestyles ended up going into alternative lifestyles because they were repelled by the church, because they had been perpetrated upon in church and nobody believed them. So it's a huge scandal. Number one, we're all familiar with the Roman Catholic Church, but it's not relegated to the Roman Catholic Church. It's any structure that affords plausible deniability, as well as, people of faith want to believe, and that's a good character quality. We want to believe, but all a predator needs is for us to want to give them the benefit of the doubt. And so a predator is not one that necessarily is wearing a trench coat, right? That's an unsophisticated predator, and he's going to be arrested very soon. But it's those that gain the trust. They're in positions of trust and authority and leadership, and they make their way into faith-based organizations so that they are the least suspected. And churches, as a matter of fact, think they're safe because they have a child abuse policy and they do a background check. Like we assume that all predators have been arrested. That is not true. Very few actually are arrested. And the more sophisticated the predators, the more they love toying with good people, and they have no problem signing a child abuse policy. So churches need to know the profile of predators. And so it mirrors also, as you brought up, in schools, very similar thing, because both clergy and teachers are school personnel are mandated reporters. And part of our concern for our organization here, Unmasking the Trans Movement, is that the push for acceptance of everything dumbs down the mandated reporter's ability to meaningfully discern the red flags of abuse and the red flags of predation, those who are gaining access to the kids. So, Cathy, from your perspective, can you speak to the sexualization that's going on in schools and how that helps? It helps the perpetrator, it helps facilitate then the trafficking of kids.
I mean, that's so big. I mean, the sexualization of our children is a huge, huge problem. And I just wanted to talk about that for a second. I've got all these notes here. Okay, so parents really have got to get this piece. So I'm going to have to look for that part out. Again, I don't want to freak people out. I think just the more
it's
you
okay.
learn about...
They kind of need to be freaked out, right? We need to get motivated.
Okay, so here's what I just say to everybody. You want to learn about this issue, you want to share about it with family, friends, and then you want to alert. So that's what you really want to do. I think the number one, and I want to go over trends for a minute, because I think that will tie into what you're asking me. And the trends that I'm seeing, and I get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of disclosures. I mean, I've got notebooks full because I write everything down. But the absolutely number one disclosure I'm getting is women and girls are afraid that they are losing their safe spaces. They are losing their safe spaces in Canada and the United States. So men who are identifying as women are aggressively and vociferously insisting on their rights to participate in every woman's activity, including access to washrooms, change rooms, gym spaces, transition houses, aesthetic services, sports teams, now in prisons, any place, any location women occupy. So this has become horrifying and absolutely frightening development for all women and girls and mothers that I speak with, without exception. They really feel that their womanhood and their motherhood is threatened, and a woman's existence is becoming undermined, if not moot. And the harm that this is causing, especially to a young girl's development, I mean, the damage is unbelievable. And now what we're hearing is many young girls that are in that teenage, just after puberty, are wanting to transition to become men. I almost don't blame them. They're not safe to be women and girls. So instead of celebrating, being a woman and girl, and celebrating being a man and, a young man, it's getting all mixed up, and it's causing a great deal of confusion. But again, for trends, I really want to emphasize pornography is a really, really, really big one. I'm hearing what law enforcement is telling me now is we've got very, very young children getting hooked on pornography. Once they're viewing it, they will act out. So they'll act out at school. They'll act out at their elementary school in the washrooms. I mean, we're seeing child-on-child sexual assault happening. And again, if parents aren't talking about how to stay safe and understanding these issues, I mean, children just are blindsided. They just don't have any clue. The other trend that we're seeing is a lot of childhood sexual assault is just taking off as a result of the porn viewing, etc. And here's a word nobody talks about, is incest. So when I present to the Indigenous, it's not a word they use, but they asked me to use it because it's so normalized in their communities. Now I'm talking about up here in Canada. I presume it's the same kind of problem down the States. I don't know. But up in Canada, Indigenous women and girls, and I present to them a lot, will tell me there's so much incest. So if they're sexually assaulted as a very young girl in their community, I guess what they'll do, they will run the first chance they get. Let's say it's grandfather, let's say it's the father, let's say it's the chief or the elder or the brother. They have nowhere to go to talk about it. They don't even have the language to know what's happening to them. But what they do know is they're not safe and they're going to run. And then they typically end up in Canada anyways, in our urban centers. Then they get pulled. Well, they're already groomed for the sex industry. And in Canada, the Indigenous are severely overrepresented in the sex industry. Racialized women and girls, girls of color, I think you've got the same thing down in the States. And again, who's taking advantage? It's white, privileged men, typically, that have power and privilege are taking advantage of the young ones. So that's the power dynamic we have. The other trend I see is there really is a lack of digital safety training, and we need that for our young people, but we need it for our parents. They don't know how to keep their family safe in terms of the devices they have. And there's a lack of social media platform accountability. For sure, the big tech companies, they have immunity from liability. So we got to change that. And so what's happening in the States are court cases. And the last trend that parents are complaining to me is that they have no support. Parents have no support, no encouragement. They don't know where to turn. They don't know where to go. So this is where I think this kind of program is very valuable, because you can talk about, okay, let's get this out in the open. It's happening everywhere. You're not strange. You're not weird. You're not odd. This is now the culture we're living in. And somehow we've got to counter that culture.
Well, and that's right. And we are, when you're talking about porn is the crisis for young people in Canada, because it like you said, it starts to change the neural pathways in the brain very quickly. They can young children particularly become very addicted quickly. And then what we're seeing, and just last week, Cathy, I had someone talk to me about a young adolescent boy who was sexually instructing kindergarten children, boys on boys, to do sexual acts. But immediately I'm thinking, this is a result of our porn-saturated, John calls it porn-saturated culture, and getting this back into line. And you are so right, the church is oblivious, really. And when I say that, most people in the church are we want to be nice and we don't want to think about these kind of things, but we have to. And I am so thankful that you're presenting on all of these. What do you think, when you're talking about the Indigenous, this is a really big issue, and it has been for years and years and years, how much sexual abuse has gone on in Indigenous communities. And it doesn't seem to change. It doesn't seem to get any better. And I'm not expecting you to give us all the answers, but do you have any ideas, any pointers of what needs to happen, how we can help those children and the parents themselves?
Okay, fantastic question. The most common question I'm asked by youth, and I just presented for 2 days this last week to Indigenous, the most common question I'm asked from youth is, what is a healthy relationship? They don't even know what a healthy relationship looks like. So that's why I say, go to my website. I have a whole handout on what a healthy relationship looks like versus an unhealthy relationship. So I've been presenting in a lot of high schools and universities lately. That's the number one question. We don't know what a healthy relationship looks like. So I talk about kindness and trust and courtesy and consideration, respect, honesty, reliability, good communication. And I say, when you have those qualities, then there can be emotional closeness and connection, because people who care for each other respect each other's decisions and boundaries. And then I say, violence is never, never, never okay. I love this quote. Everybody needs 4 things in life: something to do, someone to love, something to hope for, and someone to believe in. And I just shared that last week, and they loved it. Survivors told me it's really easy to get into the sex industry. It's very hard to get out. So we need to talk about everything beautiful in this world so that they're not pulled in any way. So for parents, I would say role model what a healthy relationship looks like. You've got to role model it. If that means that you need to do some work, then you do some work, because your children are watching. They are sponges. And I say to parents, be firm, be fair, be fun. Be firm, be fair, be fun. And that's the key to this. The big thing is talk. So I learned a little trick when I was a mom. I learned to drive my children everywhere. Now, I know lots of people say, don't do that. They should take the bus. They should be independent. No, I drove my children everywhere, because when you're driving that car, guess what? They can't get out, and you can talk about all the stuff. And you're usually driving to somewhere they really want to go to. So you have this captive audience. They can't get away. They have to listen to mom. And our girls did horseback riding, which they love. So they got me, mom in the car driving 1 hour there and 1 hour back. And that's when we had our best conversations. They were doing something they loved. And then we had the mom-daughter conversations. Magical. What I want every parent to understand, you are the best influencer, the most important influencer in your child's life. You may not believe it. You are. The research is there overwhelmingly. I think that's why there's such a strong attack on the family right now, is because moms and dads, guess what? You are so important. One of the top researchers, actually, and boy, she's unbelievable. I want to quote her. She's American. Dr. Jenny Sue Jessen is a survivor. She's a member of the USA Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. Get this, she was trafficked by her grandfather from age 4 to 17. Horrendous. She states this, and this is what I shared with the Indigenous. We need men who are courageous in their masculinity. We need men who are co-equal, co-leaders to partner within our families. We need to teach men and boys their inherent worth and value. We need good, strong dads raising their children to be good, strong people. So, I mean, that's the good news right there. And anytime I present, and I usually have mostly men in my audiences, I am their biggest cheerleader. Any man, I say, Dad, you're the key. Dad, you're the key. You got daughters, you're the key. You got a son, you're the key. You get to mentor, you get to hang out with that young person. And that's when the magic happens. So that is, again, why I am the optimist. I know if we can win over and encourage parents, don't be afraid. Don't be overwhelmed. There's help. There's lots of us dealing with this stuff. You can get help, you can get the resources, and you can be proactive and make a difference in your family, in your community, and in our nations.
Cathy, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for bringing up masculinity. You're singing my song, you know, that men will rise up and become the protectors they were created to be again. They have been so beaten down, unfortunately, by women. By women, we have to own this, and maybe not you and I, but I'm telling you, the feminist movement has literally cut men's legs off at the knees, and so we need to really encourage them and help them come back into that place. So what you just said was so important. Anyways, and I know women are important too. John, I was going to ask a question, but I better let you go ahead and ask the next one, because I talked a little too much.
No, this is so good, Cathy. And so we really are calling both moms and dads, grandparents, to get involved and to become, we can't sit on the sidelines any longer. This is a very active attack upon the family, attack upon parental rights. Those that have designs for kids, our kids, are not going to, they're heading somewhere. They have an agenda. And so to connect these dots as far as how there's this connection between what's going on in schools and trafficking, I'm going to list off a couple of bullet points so people can see how this builds. And then Cathy, I'll have you speak to this. So by encouraging early sexualization, so schools now have introduced these highly sexually deviant books that, as a matter of fact, if they replaced the drawings with literal photographs, these would be child pornography, and the adults, the teachers and administrators would be arrested. So they've gotten around the issue of child exploitation material by introducing drawings. So you introduce highly sexualized material, then you normalize deviance, sexual deviance. That's the idea of men wearing women's underwear and drag coming in, however you want to call them, drag queens or whatever. They're twerking and doing all sorts of sexually deviant things. So you've sexualized kids through material. Now you're having sexual deviance on display. And at the same time, they are downplaying the dangers of pornography. and they are introducing sexualized and pornographic links as resources in the deviant sexual material that they keep from parents, by the way. And then at the same time, they are destigmatizing prostitution. They're reframing it. They're rebranding it as sex work and as a way of kids empowering themselves. This is bodily autonomy. They are then also encouraging prostitution. They're encouraging teens to consider that as either, a temporary form of employment, or see if it's something that might fit for you. And then they are even encouraging some of the girls to pay for their top surgery by trying out prostitution for a while, get some quick cash. And then you also have the influence of OnlyFans, which then gets these young girls eventually working for what amounts to a pimp. Cathy, of what I have spoken to, what comes to mind, because again, bringing a full circle now to the issue of child exploitation and prostitution. These are all very methodical ways of breaking down boundaries, breaking down inhibitions, and before you know it, you've got kids that are ripe for the picking as far as sophisticated predators.
This is fantastic what you've just done and what you've summarized. Fantastic. Yeah, there really is a pressure now to say to young girls and young women, you can be empowered by being on OnlyFans. You can make a ton of money at it. Of course, we know it's all a lie. That's the thing. It's all a lie. In the universities up here in Canada, we've got a problem with sugar daddies because they offer to pay their university tuition, which of course is high, to be a companion. What these girls typically don't understand is sex will be expected and be involved. Again, I think the key is education. We've really got to get the education piece. I did want to pop back to children that are sexualized are vulnerable. There's no doubt about it. And this drag queen stuff and the kind of books in the libraries, I mean, it's all sexualizing children. And I talk about this with members of parliament all the time. And children that are sexualized, they will live with complex trauma, stress disorder. We call it CTSD, or some people call it complex PTSD. A woman I really like in the States is Dr. Nadine Burke. She's a pediatrician. She's popularized the idea of ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences. And she says, if you can identify those and treat those, you're going to have less problems as an adult. So I love the work she's done. There's another man called Dr. Vincent Folletti. He connects childhood experiences and physical and mental health as adults. So again, if there's childhood sexual abuse or trauma or incest, he says it's stored up in the body and it will cause problems mentally, emotionally, at every level as adults. So the research is there, the harm of sexualization of children. And MPs get very nervous when I start talking about that and saying, no, the research is there. You sexualize children, you are harming them. So that has been really useful to know. Survivors teach me all the time. I always listen to survivors. They said the most important thing they wish they had learned was that sexuality is sacred.
Yes.
Sexuality is sacred. And we must value our sexuality and other sexuality. Now, the lovely thing is when I speak to the Indigenous, they love the word sacred. They use it with me all the time. So now when I speak to them, I say, your sexuality is sacred. And the men and boys, that's how I reach them. That's what they understand. And I talk about the sacredness of sexuality. I mean, it's the deepest part of who we are. There's a top psychotrauma therapist in Germany called Dr. Ingeborg Kraus. You must get her on your program. She is fantastic. She's done all the research on prostitution, but she makes a statement that sexual trauma is the deepest form of trauma a human being can experience. I mean, she says that. And when I say to my audiences, you got to let that sink in. Sexual trauma is the deepest form of trauma a human being can experience. I mean, it doesn't get any deeper than that. That's the deepest part of our humanity and who we are. When I talk this way with men and boys, my goodness, there's tears in the room. They start to tear up and cry. And I will get literally, excuse my language, swarmed by young men hugging me, going, nobody has told us this. No one has told us this. Keep talking, Mrs. Peters. I think the most rewarding thing in my work is people say, every time I open my mouth, I save a life. And it's the boys in particular, because I say to them, I keep it simple. Porn harms, porn kills love. That's all I say. And then they all start crying and they go, well, we're all watching it. We're all hooked on it. We're all addicted. And I go, well, it kills love. And the funny thing, most young people, when you ask them, what's the vision for what you want to become? You know what? They want a good job. Ultimately, they'll want to be married and they want a family and they want a home. Every single time when I ask them what they want, that is what they want in the bigger picture. So then I say, how do you get there? How do you get there so you can have those things? And that's where then I start giving very positive messaging about, okay, let's put aside the negative stuff and let's go for the positive. And one of the biggest things I suggest is finding a good mentor, a safe and good mentor. It could be your dad. It can be your mom. It can be your grandmother. It can be somebody, but find a good, safe mentor. And then you develop that positive vision of yourself. Every day you make a decision. And sure, we all have bad stuff, but bad stuff can be the stepping stones to becoming that person that you dream of becoming. So I remember, and I always say this to high school students, they love it when I tell my little stories. I had a grade 5 science teacher that changed my life. And he simply said to us in grade 5, somebody in this room is going to change the world. He didn't say somebody in this world is going to murder. He didn't say that. He said somebody in this room is going to change the world. And in my grade 5 brain, I went, oh, okay.
Well,
So
I believe
just
that
know-
you're truly doing that now, Cathy. I believe that you really do have a purpose, and we're so grateful for all the work that you do. You've exposed so much in this 1 hour. Yeah, the emotions run deep in this whole topic, and we have a chance to obviously speak more in the future with you on multiple topics. Something that was said earlier in our broadcast in this episode was the porn industry. And it's going to be brought up here and now because I know that Dr. Ann is actually getting set for our next episode, which is going to relate to, and even John for that matter, to Mind Geek again. We're going to come back into that realm of what's going on here in Canada with the world's leading pornographers, and how that deviance isn't just corrupting Canadians, it's corrupting the world. And with that being said, how is it that these laws are even allowing these individuals to operate here in our great country? So that's a question that I know, Dr. Ann, you might be able to just kind of give us a little pretext as to what that episode will be about.
Well, that's a really good segue, and I'll just be quick because I think John comes with such expertise, but we have some things in Canada, and just received yesterday a email from MP Arnold Viersen, who is once again petitioning our Prime Minister because they did this 800 days ago to really get to the bottom of MindGeek and Pornhub, and let's do something and let's get some bills changed. So that's kind of a little bit of what we're going to be talking about. And Cathy, you are right on the cutting edge of all of that. So it's amazing. It's been just a great, great day with you today.
Cathy, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing, your mission, and you are saving lives, and you are bringing awareness to a very dark world. The issue of sex trafficking, how kids are getting sucked into this. It is enslaving young people. So thank you. Thank you for what you do.
Fantastic.
I want to thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
You're very welcome. What a fantastic couple of episodes. And I really do hope that you take the time to share them with all of your guests and clients, that people that you know. We're going to share this message far and wide here in our great country. We are Canadians after all, and they can say we're timid, but I think that timidness is starting to change a little bit with some of these topics that are starting to cause alpha males to stand up and go, that's enough of this. With that being said, this is Unmasking the Trans Movement with John Euler. You can find us on our BitChute channel. We have all of our episodes there. Just search BitChute under Google or whatever platform you use. Hopefully it's DuckDuckGo. Otherwise, you can check out our website too at unmaskingthetransmovement.com. There's a ton of resourceful information. That's what Cathy has just brought to the table over these last couple of episodes, as well as, well, everything else that seems to be happening within our schools and how you, as a parent, can stand up and take action yourselves. I'm Brad Wilder. This is Unmasking the Trans Movement. We'll see you next time.